All right, it's time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net. He's Steve Purciello, longtime educator, vice principal, high school basketball coach, and athletic director. And this is the Shot Clock Pod, the best 15 minutes of NBA random thoughts online anywhere. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you found us. The podcast was born out of the content of Steve's 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts articles, which he publishes weekly. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article, where he shares his thoughts on select teams and select situations after week 13. All right, Steve, are you ready?
Ready.
Let's do this. I'll start the clock now. All right, we start in Cleveland. A few weeks ago, you crowned the Cavaliers as official title contenders when they beat the OKC Thunder. Well, in the rematch, the Thunder punched back, and they punched back hard. And you called them, the OKC Thunder, midseason title favorites. So I'm going to ask you, what do you like about the Thunder?
They defend. They can shoot the three. It's just everything about their game. And they just continue to put pressure on the other team. When I say they defend, and I mentioned it yesterday, but Lou Dort held Donovan Mitchell to 3 for 15 from the floor.
Yeah.
Think about that. Donovan Mitchell is a dark horse MVP candidate. And he just, he just ate him up. And don't forget, Oklahoma City played this game without Hartenstein and Holmgren, who's been out for a long time. So they really had no big, while Cleveland had two bigs, Allen and Mobley, and they really couldn't take advantage of it. This team is deep. They play well together. They like each other. They're dangerous. And right now, I would say they're the favorite. I would list a couple other teams with a shot, but I definitely think, they're the favorite in what they've shown. And don't forget, in the last couple of weeks, they've beaten the Knicks twice, home and away. They've beaten the Celtics at home, and now they've beaten Cleveland. They split with Cleveland, but they've beaten Cleveland at home. So that record against those teams, and those are three of the contenders, although there's some other teams, against them is pretty convincing in its own right. I mean, the Knicks didn't have a chance in both games. So it tells you something. In Boston, they blew away in the fourth quarter. And their defense, what did they give up, 25 points or 27 points in the second half? So what I'm saying is Oklahoma City is a good defensive team, can score, they can shoot the three. They're the modern, prototypical, great team playing in modern basketball.
Yeah, what strikes me when I watch them play is they're no nonsense, right? I just get the sense that they're always kind of an even keel team. They don't panic if they're behind. They don't get too high if they're up big. They just do the same thing all the time, which is, to me, reminiscent of Coach Pop's Spurs championship teams. I mean, I don't know if that's just me, but that's what I see when I see them. And I'm really, really impressed.
It's a great point. And just to add to that, who was the leader on Pop's team and who's the leader today, and what kind of mannerisms or demeanor these people had? You have Tim Duncan,
Right.
just, very laid back, and Gilgeous Alexander, he's just, he just plays. And what's interesting, and not to comment, I think I mentioned this, how well they get along, how well that team likes each other and plays together. And that goes a long way it comes down to, all the chips getting cashed in. The biggest question for Oklahoma City moving forward, what happens in the heat of a tough playoff game? And they haven't really gone through that yet. And that would be the one thing that you might say, well, Boston might have a slight advantage, although that might be one of the few things they would have that advantage.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting. We'll see if they paid their dues, because there is a process you go through in the NBA. But calling them the midseason favorites, something I will totally double down and second. Moving on, staying in the East, you posed an interesting question about the struggling New York Knicks. and them trading away RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly for OG Anunoby. And trades are usually evaluated over time, right? A year or two later, we take a look and we can kind of see. Do you think that was a good trade, or is it just a little blip in the radar for the Knicks right now?
Knowing where the Knicks went by getting Karl Anthony Towns and giving up 2 players, if you knew that was gonna happen, it wasn't a good trade.
Hey,
If because and the Knicks are struggling right now because Towns is out. There's no depth. There's absolutely no depth on the Knicks.
yeah,
Having 2 players and believe it, personally, you know how I feel about Anunoby, but I'll take Barrett before him.
yeah,
Then you give me Quickly too, although Quickly's been hurt all year, a lot. And then it's giving you depth. You now have, and if you look at the Knicks, and I mentioned Cade Cunningham eating them up, the Knicks don't have a defensive guard. So what they're forced to do is put an Anunoby or Mikal Bridges on an offensive guard on the other team. Anunoby got eaten alive by Cade Cunningham the other night. It was ugly. And if you don't have a stopper, and I guess they're not using Josh Hart to do that, that might be the only thing they can do. They do need a defensive stopper at the guard or somebody that can do a better job than what they're getting right now.
yeah,
So that's another thing, but it's very difficult to say it was. I didn't think it was a good deal at the time, and I still don't. But it's hard because with knowing Towns was coming, then I'd say it was a crazy, it was a dumb deal. And by the way, right now, the money they're making, Quickly's making a lot of money. OJ Anunoby, I don't know, he hit the lottery because he's making over 40 million, which is incredible in my mind. But the point being, it's a little different than a year ago with the salaries these people were making. They have to, have to renegotiate. I think RJ Barrett's the only good buy in there. I think he's only in the 20s, low 20s, low to mid 20s
yeah,
in salary. So it kind of says something. And RJ Barrett is getting the chance to be the offensive force on this team as compared to with the Knicks, he was the third wheel, and he's showing what he can do. There's always a question, though, if a guy like that goes to a team like the Knicks, like he was, will he push them, help them or not? It's difficult to say.
yeah. And you and I've talked to, in shows past about the right fit, right? You got a player who maybe has just been okay for team A, gets traded to team B, and all of a sudden the culture's right, the coach is right, the situation is right, and that player flourishes. So, yeah, that's why, trades need to be evaluated over time and see how they play out. I like to think this is just a blip in the radar for the Knicks. I'm a big Josh Hart fan. So when you said defensive guard, that was my first thought. 'Cause I like Josh Hart. I think he's a pest, a good defender. But if they're not using him right, they need to figure that out in New York.
The, the very interesting. The Knicks have an important decision to make, and I don't know if they can do this. They've got to sit and say, we are going to limit minutes on
Mm,
Brunson, Bridges, and Towns and not go over 36. I don't know if Thibodeau can do that
yeah.
because when the playoffs come, you don't have depth here and you've got to figure something out. And they're going to be counting on 40 minutes a night. And if they don't have a lot left, you got a problem. And that's that beside the fact that playing a lot of minutes, they could get hurt
Yeah.
because they're overplaying. So they've got some decisions. And if they do that, the Knicks run the risk of maybe finishing fourth or fifth. And that would mean Cleveland in the second round, which gets very interesting.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that as well. Can Tibbs change? His MO or now, and chances are that he won't. But we got to move on. We got more to talk about. Let's talk about Sacramento. The Kings have turned things around. Everything points to positivity. Doug Christie has been a positive role model, a positive influence, and the team is responding. Now, that would generally be a feel good story in the NBA, but you pulled something out of that I thought was super, super interesting. Something that reflects negatively on today's modern NBA players. What was that?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be a get off my lawn guy, but what I'm going to say is this. And we can get into why, which I'll try to do. But the modern player is not good at accepting any criticism. Mike
Mm.
Brown supposedly lost the team near the end, and they were disgusted because they negative and all, but they weren't playing well. So if you're disillusioned enough to think if your record is 15-20, that all's fine and I'm great, well then you've got the problem. But the young players today don't handle the negativity real well. And that's a problem. And if you start thinking about why, well, everything is set up in our system now. When they were in college, they were recruited. They were told how wonderful they were. When they played AAU basketball, they were told they were wonderful. Throughout their high school career, everything they've done, they've been told they're the best. And now with a little adversity, we find out who can handle it and who can't. And it's really interesting. Sacramento is playing good basketball. They actually defend. They do all the good things. But I have that other part too. If you can't handle criticism, I don't know. I don't know. When going gets tough, how are you going to do? What are you going to do? That's the negative piece I have about Sacramento.
Yeah. Interesting. It used to be that teams would find players that could handle the coach. Now it looks like players are dictating what the coach can and can't
Oh,
do.
yeah.
Interesting conversation, but we got to leave a little bit of time
Well,
for the
it leads
Boston
to one
Celtics.
more thing. It leads
Go
to
ahead.
one more thing, and they call it player empowerment. But what it really means is who now is calling the shots.
Sure.
And it's become a situation where the player calls it. I'm sure out in LA there, LeBron, anything they do, the Lakers do, they run through LeBron and they wait for his approval. And that is part of the empowerment. I can't picture Bill Russell telling Red Auerbach, I don't want this guy on this. I can't picture that.
Right. You have officially moved into the get off my lawn territory with that. I just wanted to call it out.
Well, that's something I'm proud of.
Let's leave the last few minutes for the Boston Celtics. I was really surprised. You called this out in your article. They were 7-7 over the last 14 games, not counting a win last night. And it's interesting. There's a very, very good team, the defending champions. You pointed out something that I thought was pretty interesting about their fourth quarter statistic over those 14 games. What did you see that they're not doing well in the fourth?
They're getting dusted in the fourth quarter. They're just getting beat up. They had 3 blowouts. One was 40 points and that they won. And those games, they outscored the opponent big in the fourth quarter. But when you look at the 14 games, they're only minus -0.7 points, but they're minus in the fourth quarter. And that tells you something because usually good teams, even if they're playing poorly, they'll hang around and then figure it out. And they're not doing it. In fact, it gets worse. The Sacramento game, they got beat by about 15 points in the fourth quarter, and Sacramento beat them. So something's not right. The other thing I'll say to you, though, on Boston's behalf, I think their defense is broken down. They're not playing hard defensively. There's no ball pressure. They don't guard the screen and roll real well. And there's just a whole mess of things. They're leaving a lot of open threes, which then comes down to if the other team's shooting well. So there's a whole bunch of things. But something I'll point out that's really interesting. There's only one guy of the 8 guys they use the most. Only one guy, and I'm going to ask you if you can guess who it is, who's shooting a higher percentage from 3 this year compared to last year.
Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah, that's it. Every other guy is under what they did last year. Now, you can look at it 2 ways. A, they're going to start shooting better and they'll start winning. They did that last night. Or B, they had peak years and now it's going the other way.
Wow.
And that's something will determine the rest of the year. You got Drew Holiday was over 40% last year. He's down. Horford was, I believe, over 40. He's down. Jaylen Brown, I think he was 1 for 1 last night, but he's under 33%.
Wow.
So, this is a team that prides themselves on threes. And I think they are something like 15th or a little higher in 3-point percentages. Last year, I think they were second.
Hmm.
So those kind of things give you a warning sign. A, is it age? Or or they just all collectively having bad years. The last piece that goes with that, okay, threes are interesting. You shoot them when you're open. Are they taking bad threes? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of factors you have to figure out within that.
Yeah, there's so much to dissect there. This goes back to one of the early games where Boston, I think, was toying with the made 3-point shot record. I think they had 29. They couldn't hit that
It's
30th.
the Knicks, first game of the year.
First game of the year, right? And it's just kind of been downhill from there, hasn't it?
Yes,
Well, at least from a
really,
3-point perspective. Okay. Well,
it's very hard. It's very hard to qualify or quantify, whatever, this stuff, because if you're the champion, you've done it. So naturally,
Yeah.
there's a little letdown, and that's what they're doing. But it's also, you see, well, how are they letting down? Well, the defensive pressures, like I said, and the ability to shoot is not good. The other thing, when Boston played the Knicks early in the year, it was pretty obvious the ball was moving around the court. It kind of stopped over the last couple of weeks, and you almost went first pass. And a good 3-point offense it works best when you have dribble penetration and kick out. They
Sure.
weren't doing it as often, and that's one of the reasons why they're doing it. The other thing that I looked at with that was the minutes. In other words, are they playing guys too long? And the minutes are comparable. Maybe Tatum and Brown have played a little bit more than they did last year, but not a big difference. And even Drew Holiday is getting older, it's less. He's playing less this year. So that wasn't a reason or something to think about tiredness or so again, I give you the reasons and what I saw, and we'll see.
Yeah, and that's the moral of the story, and we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. Is this a blip in the radar? Are the Celtics going to right the ship, or was last season their peak shooting season, and we're seeing the real Boston Celtics now? That would be an interesting storyline. But that's it. You heard the buzzer go off. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Our time is up. Please make sure to read Steve's entire 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article. We'll link that somewhere, wherever you're hearing or watching this, to get more NBA random thoughts after week 13 of the 2024-25 NBA season. And please, as always, consider subscribing, liking, commenting. All that stuff matters, and we appreciate all of it. Join us next week on the Shot Clock Pod, the best 15 minutes of the random NBA thoughts online. Anyway, thanks again, Steve. We'll talk next week.
Thanks.